Hello, it's Parm King, and I am developing, for a lot of you know, Iberia RPG. It's a rule system for role playing, and it's something I've been working on for quite some time. One of the core mechanics in here, the rolling mechanic, the die mechanic, is something that I've been wrestling with. I had an initial mechanic I've been working on for the last 6 months, and I recently made a significant change to it, but keeping within the theme of what I'm trying to accomplish. One of the things that I wanted to do in my role-playing game was use a probability distribution curve rather than just a straight percentage of a single die. The difference between rolling a single die and rolling 2 or more die is creating a probability distribution curve. And why do I feel that is important in an RPG game? Well, in most games that we play, whether it's Monopoly or Backgammon, or if you play craps, we're rolling 2 six-sided dice and adding them together. And this gives us an interesting probability distribution function. For instance, to roll snake eyes, on a pair of dice, there are 36 possible different outcomes. To roll a 2, there's only one way to roll a 2, or snake eyes, and that's a 1 and a 1. That's a 1 in 36 chance of rolling snake eyes, or for instance, boxcars, 6s. However, if I was going to roll a 7, how many combinations on here are there to roll a 7? Well, I can roll a 1 and a 6, or I can roll a 6 and a 1. I can roll a 5 and a 2, or a 2 and a 5. I can roll a 3 and a 4, or a 3 and a 4. There are actually 6 out of 36, or 1 in 6 chance of rolling a 7 versus a 1 out of 36 chance of rolling a 2. And you get this curve. If you graphed this out, you would get a curve, and I'll show you that right here, actually. So there's a great website, and special thanks to Jason Jasper Flick, who's actually helped me with some of the functions on here. This is what it looks like if you're rolling 2d6 dice. And this graph here shows that rolling a 7, right, you have it's about 16.5% chance of rolling a 7 versus rolling a 2 or a 12. So you have a higher probability of rolling that 7 than you do any other single number on 2 dice. Now, if I had a single 1d20 die with 20 different, a 1 in 20 chance on the different outcomes, it's just a straight, right across the line, a 5%. You can see this at the very top, a 5% chance. And when you're looking at trying to roll above or below, like I need to roll at least a 10 or higher, a 9 or higher, it's just a straight incremental adding 5%. Now, if you're using this just to try to beat a roll under or roll over system, it works okay. In fact, it works better than okay. It works really well. It's pretty simple. I'm trying to beat a 10. I need to roll higher than a 10. And I just configure that out by just looking on here, and I have a greater than 50% chance of beating a 10 because it's all 5% increments, or rolling any other number. The problem with that is if any other function that you want to roll, like I want to hit a specific number, or for instance a 20 or a 1, everything has an equal outcome. Each side facet on this die has a 5% chance of coming up. So for roll under and roll over system, it works really fine. I had initially incorporated a 2D system. It was a D10 plus another die which represented skill, because I wanted to create that probability distribution curve, because I wanted there to be some mechanics in the game and allow the dice to give the player more information to make more informed decisions. And when you have a probability distribution curve, it's more information to make a better and informed decision. It's harder to get certain numbers than it is to get other numbers. And you can still use the roll over or roll under system. It also makes hitting a 20 or getting, which is a critical success, or a critical failure even more difficult, which I think should be more representative in the game. Rolling a 20 should not be if it's going to create some critical damage, should be a harder number to roll than any other number on that die, including rolling a 1. So I also felt rolling a probability distribution function was a great idea mechanic in the game. One problem with that, and I got some feedback with it, and I kind of ignored it initially. It's like, well, you're just adding dice. Maybe it's a D10 plus a D8 or a D10 and a D12. Some of the feedback I got is like, well, you're using 2 different die and whatever, and it becomes maybe a little bit more complicated and you're adding numbers together. And I guess we're all a little bit different. And I figured, well, you're just adding 2 numbers together. It's not that difficult. But it wasn't as elegant as I wanted it to be. And I'm leaning towards this elegant methodology. And elegance in math and science is using the least number of variables to create a very simple outcome, take complexity and simplify complexity into this very elegant methodology, beautiful methodology. And there was a video I was watching, and I can't remember the video, but it had Dale Kingsley from Monarch's Factory in it. And she was talking about, and I recommend her videos highly. If you're looking for content and ideas, and the thought process of building and creating unique scenarios for your player, she's excellent. She's very well read. I believe she's studying both English literature and humanities of some sort. So she's very well read, and she likes to talk about Greek mythology and Shakespeare, which I'm a huge Shakespearean fan. And I'm also an author, and I think one of the things I like about role-playing game is that the concept of story, the narrative of man versus man, man versus himself, and conflict. I think that's what really makes role-playing games strong. But she mentioned something in there that she liked simple mechanics because she didn't want the mechanics to get in the way of the gameplay. And when you start adding more stuff and you're adding, subtracting, and she made a very funny comment. She's like, look, and I'm like an English major or whatever. I'm not a math major. And so, even adding dice and stuff, it slows me down because I have to stop and think. And as somebody that used to do math my entire life, I just became kind of like, I just did it as part of my thing. And I didn't ever appreciate that difference until I listened to her. And I've also heard a couple of other people say it. So how can I create this distribution function and I'll just show you that here on a graph. I'm going to put in the 2d6 here. And you get that nice distribution curve. In fact, if you use 3d6, you get a really nice, beautiful curve. There you go. How can I create that and simplify the solution down? And that's when I came up with a thought process is, well, you can use 1 die. So you don't have to add anything together. But if you roll 3 of them and pick one of those dice, the highest, medium, or lowest, you actually create that interesting distribution function. There's no adding that you need to do. It's just using one of the 3 die. And I go, oh my God, that is a way to use the mechanic that I want, that distribution mechanic, without having to roll different types of dice and add them together. So let me show you that here. And again, this is special thanks to Jasper Flick of Any Dice, because I ran a lot of probabilities and exported a lot of tables out of here. If I want, and I'm going to put each one in here. So 3D20, and I'm going to name this one named highest. 3 of the 3D20 die. And I'm just going to copy and paste this. I'm going to put 3 outputs in here. And I want to demonstrate those 3 outputs in here. And I did something wrong already. Okay, so each one of these has to have an at sign. At. And this is the second, the third, and this is going to be middle. This is going to be low. And I'm just going to make this one high to make it easy. What I'm about to do on this system is I'm going to simulate rolling 3 D20 die simultaneously, and either using the lowest one, the middle die, or the high die, and picking one of those dice. Now this does something really interesting. Without adding dice together, you create a distribution curve. So let's calculate this and take a look at what I'm talking about. So we have 3 different lines. Each line represents one of the die. So the black line, which is the top one, says I'm rolling, the function here says I'm rolling 3d20 dice, and I want to take the highest value, okay, ignoring the middle value and the lowest value. And you can see here that I have a higher probability of rolling a 20 if I roll 3 dice and select the highest one versus rolling a 1, which is less than 1%. You can see it actually, there's a curve here. If I roll the lowest one, which is the blue line, I have a higher probability of rolling a 1, which is about a little over 14%, versus rolling a 20. And if I use the middle die, well, I have a highest probability of rolling a 10 or 11 with a lower probability of rolling a 1 or a 20. What we've done is by rolling 3 dice and selecting one of the 3, built into the mechanic of the roll becomes the probability distribution function. We're just picking one of the die. I thought, boy, this is one of those elegant, simple mechanics where somebody like if Dale was playing in my game, she just has to pick the highest, middle, or lowest. There's no addition or subtraction that needs to be done. It's a simple solution. I thought, boy, this works really well and fits into the mechanic of my game. And let me explain that really quickly, what the mechanic was. Now, in my particular game, if I scroll down here, you can see I said special thanks to Dale and also special thanks to Jasper for any dice. So special thanks to both of them in this game. One of the mechanics in this game is, well, I'll just talk about it quickly, is we don't have any levels. Health points are fixed. And because there's no levels, how do I demonstrate somebody that's unskilled versus a master versus a grandmaster using the 3d20 die? Well, it's pretty simple here, and I'll show you what it is. There's 3 skill levels. If you're unskilled, you're going to use the lowest of the 3 die. If you're skilled or master, you're going to use the middle die. And if you're a grandmaster, you get to use the high die to determine your attack roll or your spellcast roll or your tradecraft. So it's a really simple mechanic. You're just rolling 3 die. I love the d20 die. I think most people do. They're familiar with it. You can actually think of the 3d20 system as an advanced advantage-disadvantage system. You're rolling 3d20s, selecting the low, the middle, or the high, based on if you're unskilled, a master, or a grandmaster. It's pretty interesting here because I'm going to show you here how this works in the game. Let me just scroll down really quickly to what I'm talking about. I've gone too far. Let me go right to here. So in the game, depending on if you're using a melee weapon, a ranged weapon, or a spell, you're rolling 3d20 dice. And if you're, let's talk about just the weapon. If you're unskilled in the weapon, you're going to use the low 3d20 die. And you're rolling against the enemy's dexterity. Now, just to give you a frame of reference, the average dexterity for somebody with no modifiers is 10. And so I just started it as 10. And obviously somebody that's really dexterous or a creature that has a lot of dexterity is going to have a higher number. Well, if you're unskilled and you're going to roll the lower die with no modifiers, you have about a 16% chance of hitting. You know, you've got a sword and the sword will do damage, but you're not really skilled in it. You just picked it up for the first time. You haven't practiced with it. Now, if you practice, and I have a whole mechanic to practice, you can become master using that sword. And now you get to add your ability modifier. This graph here is with no ability modifier, but now you have a 57.5% chance of hitting a dexterity of 10 or 50%. That's even without adding your strength modifier. Your grandmaster has a 90% chance because you're using the high die. And so that's how melee attack works. Range attack, if you're using a bow, a crossbow, or throwing a dagger, you can throw in the same zone. We use zone combat. Talk about that later. It's an abstract range, but short range is about 60 to 100 feet away, and long range is like, 100 feet to 120 feet away. Well, if you're a master with a bow, you have a shooting out there, you have about a 42% chance to hit with no modifiers. And if you're a grandmaster in it, you have an 83% chance to hit. Spells work the same way. When you're casting a spell, every time you cast a spell, you have to roll a 3d20 dice to see if your spell cast was successful. You can cast as many times as you want. We don't have any spell slots, anything like that. But the spell, every type of spell has a difficulty level. So there's a common spell, which you have to beat at 10. You have an uncommon spell, you have to beat a 12 difficulty. Rare is 14. An epic spell, which is really powerful, is 18. And of course, the super rare legendary spells, you have to roll a 20 or higher. So if you find a legendary spell, well, it's going to be very hard for you to cast unless you become a grandmaster and you apply your ability modifier. It still doesn't have a very good chance of hitting, but a legendary spell is just going to do epic damage. So the relationship between the damage of something and the difficulty of it to cast has this kind of symbiotic relationship. And so using this very simple mechanic, 3d20, and selecting the high, low, or medium, I believe is a really elegant, simple methodology that you don't have to spend a lot of time explaining. There's no adding or subtracting. You just roll 3d20, and if you're unskilled, you use the low one. And if you're a grandmaster, you use the high one. The mechanics are melee weapon, you're rolling against the enemy's dexterity, you're in hand-to-hand combat. Range, you're rolling against a range number, or spells, you're just rolling against the difficulty level of the spell. I'm really excited about this mechanic. I've been spending the last 10 days working on it, playing with it. I have to, again, a big shout out to Any Dice and Jasper Flick responding to me and helping me working on some mechanics. I wrote a lot of different functions so I could roll some tables and stuff like that. And I think this is it. I think this is the mechanic that's really going to make the game elegant, simple to pick up. I want the game I want the narrative, the rules to fit the narrative. I don't want to interrupt the narrative or the storytelling to jump into some heavy mechanics, crunchy mechanics that are going to slow the game down. And now we're rolling dice and just adding a bunch of numbers together. I like crunchy games. I'm a big war game player. I like a lot of crunch, but in this particular game, I really wanted this to be a game that really pushes forward a narrative type of thing, but it needs to have a mechanic to solve both skills, but also combat, and make it something that's easy to play, that doesn't get into interrupting that narrative. The rules, I feel, the motto that I have in my head all the time is the rules need to fit the narrative, because the narrative is the driving force in Iberia RPG. Anyway, I hope this makes sense to you. I hope I did a good job explaining the 3D20 mechanic. I welcome comments and criticisms. If you haven't, you can join the Iberia Discord channel. I'll put a link down below to this video where I've been uploading the latest draft versions of the game. And if you're interested in it, download it. I'm updating it about once a week. Please go ahead and give me your comments and feedback. And thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Like and subscribe. I make some other videos. I'm running a Curse of Strahd campaign, streaming that. I'm running some videos, some tips on using Foundry, and I'll be making more videos on the Iberia RPG. Thanks again for watching. This is Parm King signing out, and may all your rolls be critical 20.